Hi, everyone. Today I wanted to talk to you about finding poetic language that might bump up the quality of your memoir. And this is really an advanced writing technique. So if you are currently still finishing your memoir, or you feel like you are still working through adding those basic narrative techniques that we talked about in week 8, this lesson can be skipped. This is really for those who are really ready to turn in their memoir at this very moment and feel like it's fairly complete, but have the time and sort of interest to add some really cool poetic devices to just make it more meaningful and more of a lovely writing piece overall. So, there's a bunch of poetic techniques that you can use in regular prose writing, and prose means paragraph form, right? So I outlined some of the ones in red that I think make a really nice transition from poetry to prose. Similes and metaphors. This is something that can easily be used, especially with that inner thinking. Like, I was as hungry as a horse, or I felt as if my brain was going to explode like an atomic bomb. These are similes and metaphors that you can use in your writing to really illustrate to the reader how a character, excuse me, how a character is feeling or even behaving, right? Personification. This is really sometimes a difficult thing to use, but I think it's quite an interesting device when I bump into it in writing because it's very subtle, right? Um, my heart fluttered. Heart is an organ, but a flutter is a living thing that a butterfly does. So even something as simple as that is considered personification. The sun um, welcomed me to a brand new day, right? Or the window, um, I don't know, that was kind of a tough one. The window allowed the wind to caress my face in a stuffy room. Things like that, where it really allows sensory language to come alive through personification. Rhyme and rhyme scheme, that's a little more difficult, so I did not highlight that in red. But for those of you who want to stop in the middle of your prose and add a cute little limerick or a poem or something to lighten the mood or even deepen the mood, sometimes quick poetry can do that. And I'm sure you've all read books that the author finds that an interesting way to grab your attention. Alliteration. This is one of my favorites, and I find that I use this often. You can see crispy clouds careen across a sunny sky. The reader doesn't necessarily notice that outright, but the brain does pick it up, and it really allows the reader to feel the smoothness of that writing, even though it's not obvious. It's one of the more subtle narrative or poetic devices to use, and it's really one of my favorites. We already use inner thinking, but symbolism is something that I know some of you are already using, but I love symbolism. And symbolism can come in the form of many things. Think about if you are somebody who has a certain, like, I'm Italian, so gravy, which is tomato sauce, is symbolic for me because it means Sunday and it means family and it means great food. So if I were going to write a memoir about my life, I would not be able to do that without the recurring images of family dinner that involves good pasta and gravy, which we Italians from South Philly, we call spaghetti sauce gravy. So that's symbolism, right? Any motif that adds to your theme, any repetitive image that adds to your theme. And speaking of repetitive image, that brings me to repetition. I know today in class we talked about getting rid of repetition, and that definitely is correct when we're talking about those small words like and the, and am is, was, were, been, being, and things that we really don't want to see repeated. But sometimes repetition can be used in a poetic way, especially if it's a repetition of a scene. If you're using circular structure, or a repetition of a motto, if you're using journey, and this is something that you keep a mantra that you keep repeating to yourself like the only constant in life is change, and you keep telling yourself that so you don't stress out over change. That is good repetition that really forces the reader to see that it's meaningful. So, all of these poetic devices add deep meaning to your memoir where it might be lacking. You want to emphasize something, try one of these poetic devices. I'm looking forward to reading your work.